What's up, cool people? I'm Matt Conroy. Welcome back to our Bible study. Okay, so we've got Numbers chapter 27, and I almost need to remind myself what happened last time. I know the chapter 26 had the second registration of Israel's troops and all that, because basically the older generation had died out, and now we've gotten to a new generation that, you know, at least hopefully soon-ish will be ready to go to the Promised Land. And yes, this is picking up right where we left off. Chapter 26 was the last chapter that I did before. So, yeah. Continuing right where we were. Yeah, I guess that's where we're at right now, and let's hop right into this. This chapter isn't looking to be too long. So, Numbers chapter 27, here we go. One day, a petition was presented by the daughters of Zelophehad, Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. Their father, Zelophehad, was a descendant of Hepher, son of Gilead, son of Machir, son of Manasseh, son of Joseph. So 1, 2, 3, 4 generations between, I don't know, anyway. These women stood before Moses, Eleazar the priest, the tribal leaders, and the entire community at the entrance of the tabernacle. Our father died in the wilderness, they said. He was not among Korah's followers, who rebelled against the Lord. He died because of his own sin. But he had no sons. Why should the name of our father disappear from his clan just because he has no sons? Give us property along with the rest of our relatives. So that was their kind of petition, as it said in the first verse, was that they were asking for property because normally, you know, things being very patriarchal back in those times, property was really only exchanged between the men, and thus if a man didn't have any sons, they didn't really have... I mean, I'm not going to say they didn't have right to any land or property, you know, any of the women in the family remaining, but, you know, it was generally assumed, at least, that any family property or exchanges thereof would have just followed through the men. But again, no son of Zelophehad here, so kind of an awkward situation for his daughters. Also, the footnote there just says the tabernacle is more like tent of meeting in the original Hebrew. Then I guess we'll move on to verse 5. So Moses brought their case before the Lord. And the Lord replied to Moses, "The claim of the daughters of Zelophehad is legitimate. You must give them a grant of land along with their father's relatives. Assign them the property that would have been given to their father. And give the following instructions to the people of Israel. If a man dies and has no son, then give his inheritance to his daughters. And if he has no daughter either, transfer his inheritance to his brothers. If he has no brothers, give his inheritance to his father's brothers. But if his father has no brothers, give his inheritance to the nearest relative in his clan. This is a legal requirement for the people of Israel, just as the Lord commanded Moses." So, this whole situation basically sets somewhat of a legal precedent, you might say, among the Israelites that basically establishes the chain of possibilities in terms of, you know, how any family property or claims to such property would have gone throughout the family tree. I don't know if today's inheritance traditions necessarily go like that. I think it's usually nowadays, assuming a man is married, I think the estate usually defaults to his wife first. But then, if he's divorced or a widower or anything like that, then maybe it resembles something closer to this. Plus, there's more... Yeah, this is assuming if they have no will. I'm not sure will writing was as much of a thing for, the Israelites back in, these times that we're reading from. But, yeah, of course, if there's a will involved, then it pretty much goes to whatever the will says, instead of this sort of default, procedure. Okay. Now we're getting to verse 12, and the focus is shifting a little bit. So, one day the Lord said to Moses, "Climb one of the mountains east of the river, and look out over the land I have given the people of Israel. After you have seen it, you will die like your brother Aaron, for you both rebelled against my instructions in the wilderness of Zin. When the people of Israel rebelled, you failed to demonstrate my holiness to them at the waters. These are the waters of Meribah at Kadesh in the wilderness of Zin." Then Moses said to the Lord, "O Lord, you are the God who gives breath to all creatures. Please appoint a new man as leader for the community. Give them someone who will guide them wherever they go and will lead them into battle, so the community of the Lord will not be like sheep without a shepherd." Okay, so I guess Moses' time is coming quickly, which is not surprising, given that, his siblings, Aaron and Miriam, have already died, and, the entire rest of that generation that was basically too scared to enter the Promised Land, they've all died out, as we pretty much got a hint of in the last chapter or two. So God's like, all right, get ready, because it's coming. Okay, so the mountains of Abarim might be what it said originally. Also, when it says the river here, by default, I would almost assume that would have been, because with the context of the last chapter, I think it might have said that they were by the Jordan River, so it could be there. If it's not the Jordan River, it would have been probably assumed that it's the Euphrates, but, again, context of previous chapters would indicate they might be by the Jordan River. But anyway, so he's supposed to climb up a mountain, and Moses gets to at least, have a, not quite bird's eye, but a high up view of the Promised Land, even though he's not actually going to be allowed to enter it. And he's not able to enter it because when God asked him to speak to a rock and give the people water when they were complaining, he instead struck it. So, yeah, that, he kind of did what God wanted, but not exactly. He tried to do it his own way. And because of that disobedience, he doesn't get to enter the Promised Land. But of course, since God's basically okay, death is coming, Moses wants to make sure that there's another leader for the people of Israel. Also, footnote there at Kadesh, Hebrew just says waters of Meribah Kadesh, which is probably it's probably the same-ish meaning, just probably a more traditional Hebrew way of wording it, and showing the name of that place. So, yeah. Moses wants a new leader appointed so that the people won't just suddenly be, like, scattered or wandering around aimlessly or anything like that. So then we get to verse 18. The Lord replied, "Take Joshua son of Nun, who has the Spirit in him, and lay your hands on him. Present him to Eleazar the priest before the whole community, and publicly commission him to lead the people. Transfer some of your authority to him, so the whole community of Israel will obey him. When direction from the Lord is needed, Joshua will stand before Eleazar the priest, who will use the Urim, one of the sacred lots cast before the Lord, to determine his will. This is how Joshua and the rest of the community of Israel will determine everything they should do." So Moses did as the Lord commanded. He presented Joshua to Eleazar the priest and the whole community. Moses laid his hands on him and commissioned him to lead the people, just as the Lord had commanded through Moses. Okay, so we basically have our new leader appointed in Joshua, who was one of the two scouts who, observed the promised land, and they were the only two scouts that actually gave a good report on it, and, tried to encourage the people to still enter it, even though everybody else was kind of afraid of the inhabitants who were already living there. And that's also the reason why Joshua and Caleb are like the only two out of the old generation who get to live long enough to enter the promised land. But Joshua being one of them, I'm thinking probably the younger of them, he winds up being appointed the new leader. I don't mean to say that it's like important that he was the younger one. I'm thinking he was, just because of what happens later in the eventual sequence of, Caleb and Joshua dying. But anyway, so yeah. So now this verse about direction being needed, it seems like, Joshua was in command, but he wasn't necessarily assigned as much, or it wasn't assumed that he would have as close a connection to God, which is why he would stand before Eleazar when seeking direction from the Lord, rather than, like, Moses typically just went and sought direction from God on his own without Aaron or any of the high priests involved. It was just Moses and God. Joshua not necessarily having the same connection to God as Moses did. It's, I don't know if it's required with the way this is worded, but it's definitely kind of assumed the best practice, at least, that he would also kind of, like, seek God's will in tandem with the high priest, who was Eleazar in this particular moment. So anyway, yeah, I guess that kind of wraps things up. Just had the whole, Zelophehad's daughter's, issue with the claim of property, and then appointing a new leader for Israel. Okay, so, as usual, like and share if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell to get updates when I post new videos. Look down in the description to get info on other social media pages and all that good stuff. And leave comments down below there with any thoughts you have. Especially if they're related to, Bible questions, faith topics, anything, or even just other video ideas and other stuff like that. But anyway, hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you for the next video. But until then, stay cool, people.